Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Crafting and Crime Daily. I'm your host, Rebecca, and I'm going to recap some live trials that have occurred this week. But first, it's Friday. I don't want to lose you. Just bear with me. It's just a shtick that I do. If you're new to the channel, I'm so glad to have you. But on Fridays, I get up. Everybody gets out of their chair in my dragonfly. Is this no? It's a butterfly, dragonfly. We get out of our chair and we dance. Yes, we do the hula because we're going to talk about Lori Vallow Daybell. Remember, she got married in Hawaii on the beach. How romantic. Isn't it romantic when you find your true love? Okay, I just lost my audience. Average watch time 57 seconds. Good morning, everybody. It's Friday. I'm being goofy. Look at this mess I've got going here. I didn't finish a lot this week. I finished the dress and I would say 4 sections of the confetti, the garden, the flowers, I think the other night I used every single one of the 64 colors in that little area. Yeah. So I'm going to finish up a little bit that I have, just a couple of areas that I have to do, and then I'm going to get out my Grafgan for June, the rainbow Grafgan. Yeah, I started it, but I need to get underway with that because next Sunday I leave for the retreat. Yes, a little over a week. I'm going to be leaving for the crafting retreat that's going on in Ohio. And I drive. It's about a 12-hour drive, but I put on an Audible book and I have a good time. I've got an Audible book saved called Lick, L-I-C-K. Use your imagination. I'm going to. Yeah. I like books like that. Right now, I just finished book 2 of Tara West is the author, and it's called Hungry for Her Wolves series. There's 11 books in this series, so now I started book 3. So good. Yes, there is knee knocking in the book. I'm getting way off course here. I'm sorry. There is knee knocking in the book, but man, it's a really good story. Yeah, she's married to four guys that turn into wolves. She can turn into a wolf too. Yeah, if you like that sort of thing, there you go. All right, so let's first get Lori Vallow Daybell off the table. I got my ice. I've switched to iced coffee now because it's too dang hot for hot coffee. This was a gift to me at last year's crafting retreat from my friend Tia with Tia's Crazy Craft Addictions channel. Okay, so Lori Vallow Daybell asked for a new trial, and that's routine. They generally always ask for a new trial. But here was the grounds that she asked for a new trial. She said that the jury instructions were confusing. And they pointed to an interview that was done by Nate with East Idaho News. And I'm sorry, Nate Eaton. His last name just came to me. Nate Eaton with East Idaho News did an interview with one of the jurors. It was a really good interview. He's an excellent reporter, journalist. I mean, he's really good. So he interviewed him and he said that some of the jurors thought that the jury instructions were confusing. But the judge, in denying Lori Vallow's motion for a new trial, said, I watched this interview and he specifically said, I was not confused by the instructions, but other people were. And the judge said they had ample opportunity to come to me during the deliberations and say, can you clarify this? This is confusing. Nobody came forward. So motion denied. Yeah. So she does not get a new trial. So there you go. She is scheduled to be sentenced, I think, on July 31st, and we will tune in for that. I mean, she's going to get life in prison, multiple counts. Death penalty is off the table, and here's the reason why. Because, if anybody deserves the death penalty, the prosecution screwed up not probably, maybe not intentionally, I don't know, but they violated a discovery order by failing to turn over in a timely fashion a lot of information to the defense. So the defense argued that they were prejudiced. Uh, they would not have time for their death penalty specialist to review all of that information in time for the trial. So the judge says, fine, death penalty is off the table. There you go. So that dealt with that. And interesting enough, when they were asking for this new trial, the attorneys for Lori Vallow Daybell, they said, if you give us a new trial, you could just link it, you could just bunch it up in there with Chad Daybell's and try them together, and which is an interesting argument. But the judge said, no, you don't get a new trial. Okay, moving on. What else is there to report going on in the news? Oh, in Minneapolis. So the Merrick Garland, the Attorney General for the United States, did a press conference probably about 30 minutes ago where the Department of Defense actually did an investigation of the Minneapolis, I'm just butchered that, the Minneapolis Police Department after the death of George Floyd. Now, he said there's already been 4 officers convicted associated with that particular crime, but they were investigating the Minneapolis Police Department as a whole, and they found several things that were not above board. That they were violating the rights of the disabled, that they were, it was a whole laundry list of things that are wrong with the Minneapolis Police Department. And, because he said, these things didn't, this thing that happened to George Floyd didn't happen in a vacuum. There was something systemic within that police department that led to what occurred. And he said that the Department of Defense has entered into some kind of an agreement with the Minneapolis Police Department. I didn't listen to the entire, it was like a lengthy press conference where he went into each one in detail, but I'm sure they've got to clean up their act. So interesting. Okay, let's put the light pad on. All right, so yesterday I left off talking about Megan Amirowitz. Look, I got the last name on the first try. Megan Amirowitz was on trial for the death of her father. The prosecution alleged that she threw 100% lie, drain cleaner on her father while he was sleeping and intoxicated, I might add, very intoxicated. He suffered 41% of burns over his entire body. So what did the prosecution have? Well, they had a video that Megan sent to her friend. She made a video and sent it through Messenger saying, I didn't want to have to type all this out, but here's what happened. And she says she threw stuff at her dad. Then there was the police interview with her at her party at the hotel that they interrupted in the backseat of a car. She gets out of the car, they talk to her, and after about 9 minutes, she finally says, yeah, I might have thrown some white stuff on him, but just near him, not on him. Well, I no sooner get my video done yesterday and edited, rendered, uploaded, boom, there's a verdict. Yeah, it was quick. Oh my gosh. I don't think they deliberated 2 hours. I don't think it was even 2 hours. But they came back and the verdict was read so quickly I missed it. I'm like, wait a minute, what just happened? So here's what the judge, and I think the judge, the more I looked at her, the more I thought, wow, she's a little person. It's very interesting. So she looks at the verdict, she puts it in an envelope, hands it to the clerk to read, and she doesn't even have the defendant stand up. She's sitting there clutching her sweater, and it's read. Here's how it was read. Guilty. I'm like, that was it? Well, guilty, and then they read guilty, unlawful possession of chemical irritants causing death. That's it. I'm like, oh, that's anticlimactic. So she starts crying, and they put her in handcuffs and they take her away. She will be sentenced on July 25th, I believe. Now, my hope is that, you know, I did look up the penalty for the charge. She does face life in prison without the possibility of parole. Actually, no, it doesn't say that. It just says life in prison, up to life in prison, or any other amount of time that the judge feels is warranted. So hopefully, clearly this girl feels very remorseful for what she did. And I hope that shows at the sentencing, and that the judge gives her some kind of sentence that reflects her age, her maturity at the time that this happened. And always in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, is this because she reminds me of my granddaughter? Or, would I be saying these things if she was anybody else? Joe Schmo that was picked up out of the gutter on the street at 19 years of age for doing some kind of crime. Would I feel that sympathy? I don't know. I don't know. But I feel like she had just turned 18 and she was really immature. She was living in a home with an alcoholic father who was a hoarder. The house was disgustingly dirty, and her mom couldn't have cared less about, I love my daughter, but I'm going to put her in the same freaking dress for 3 days at a trial. Um, Clearly, the girl didn't have the best upbringing in the world. So I hope that the sentence reflects that and gives her a chance to live a normal life someday. Maybe I'm thinking 10 years, 15 years, where she gets out after a few years and does supervision. I don't know. That's just my thoughts. What are your thoughts? Leave them down in the comment. What do you think? Am I being biased? I could. That's a possibility. Maybe the judge will too. I don't know. Okay. Now, back to the Scott Peterson trial. Scott Peterson is on trial for his failure to act, resulting in 7 counts of child neglect, 3 counts of culpable negligence, and 1 count of perjury. So they actually entered a stipulation on day 6. I finished up watching day 5 and all of day 6. So I still have day 7 and today to watch over the weekend. I'll bring you up to speed on Monday. We got a little behind because I covered this other trial. But you guys needed a break, right? You needed a break. I get it. So a stipulation was entered instead of bringing in the medical examiner to talk about all of the people that died, all the children that died as a result of what the prosecution theory of the case says was child neglect by Scott Peterson, the school resource officer. He's a police officer, not a babysitter. Um, I know it's cruel of me to say that. So instead of bringing in the medical examiner to talk about each autopsy, they stipulated, because one of the elements is you have to prove is that there was these deaths. So uh, so they if you enter into this stipulation, then you don't have to put any proof on a trial. So they don't have to bring in the medical examiner. So, and that's for the deaths of Kara Laughlin, Joaquin Oliver, Jamie Gutenberg, Peter Wang, Scott Beagle, and Meadow Pollock. Those were the individuals, the children, teenagers that died on the 3rd floor of the 1200 building on February 14th of 2018 at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. So that accounts for the child neglect charges. So yeah. So the one the woman that they had a woman appear by Zoom, and it was a defense witness taken out of order because this is when she was available. She, really sweet lady, Hispanic. She had been a campus monitor at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas high school for 20 years. And a campus monitor is part of the security department, and it's their job to just kind of watch what's going on around the school. And if anything's going down, like a fight, or she sees somebody committing a crime, or, whatever the case may be, her job to notify the school resource officer, because he's only one person on a 45-acre campus with 3,000 students. So there were several campus monitors, security specialists, all part of this security department. Her her first thought after hearing the fire alarm was that someone had pulled the fire alarm. They had already had a fire drill earlier in the day, and she said they do have an individual that they are aware of on the campus that likes to pull the fire alarm. So that's what she figured it was. Then, very quickly thereafter, she heard Scott Peterson come over the radio, and she's 100% positive it was Scott Peterson, and called the code red and said, "Stay back, stay in," because they were evacuating for the fire drill. And he told them, get back in, stay back. So the defense is putting this witness on to show that he wasn't standing there doing nothing. He was trying to direct people. He was trying to figure out where the shots were coming from, getting the code red called, getting everybody else into action. Meanwhile, you've got two different police agencies responding, and nobody knows what the other ones do. Oh my God, the chaos that day must have been, the absolute chaos. Uh, I would love to do the closing arguments in this case on behalf of Scott Peterson, because he is being a scapegoat if there ever was one. That's just my opinion. Okay, so back to this woman. So she also heard Scott Peterson over the radio directing the assistant principal to go look at the cameras to see if he can tell where the shooter is, what building the shooter's in. Um, and then she acknowledged that there is a very loud echo in that area between the 800 hallway and the 1200 building. She said less so between 7 and 8, but more so, less so between 7 and 12, but more so between 7 and 8. But there's very loud echo. So she agreed that Scott Peterson was always accountable, that she never saw him cower in any kind of situation, that if there was a fight, he would break it up. She had a very, very high opinion of Scott Peterson. And that was it. So then they put on another police officer, and he's a captain with Coral Springs Police Department, another person that rushed out and responded. By the time he gets to the scene, the shooter has been gone for 14 minutes. Another one that's running around, he was running around with the officer Shroy, who we talked about the other day, who was just trying to find something to do. So he and Officer Shroy are going here and going there, and they're not needed here and they're not needed there. And so they're just trying to find some way to be useful, and they end up, evacuating kids out of the, clearing the rest of the buildings. Now, here's the interesting thing that happened. And I feel so vindicated sometimes when the judge acknowledges, something that I've said, and I'm like, I was right. So the other day I mentioned that the prosecution was using these police officers as their experts. They were asking them to opine what the school resource officer, what would you have done if you were here and here and blah, blah, blah. And I said the defense should be objecting, but I think he's strategically not objecting. I don't know why. So then yesterday, with this police officer on cross-examination, the defense was doing the same thing. He was giving him a hypothetical situation and saying what should happen in this situation, what should happen in this situation. Same thing that the prosecution had been doing with the other three officers. But in this case, the prosecution kept objecting. Object, and it kept getting sustained. And of course, this lawyer by now, he just keeps going. Finally, the judge gets pissed. He sends the jury out and tells the witness to go wait out in the hall. And he just lets into this guy. He admonishes him. He says, "Listen, this guy is a fact witness. He is not an expert. We are not giving, we're just here to find out what he did that day. He's not, you cannot use him as an expert. Well, the prosecution did with his 3. Yeah, and you didn't object. And I'm thinking, that's what I said. I certainly would have sustained it if you had objected. So, yeah. So he says, fine, I'll move on. Yeah, buddy, you should have paid attention. You should have objected. In any case, I think they probably will also put on an expert. I hope at some point, an expert in school resource officer training, or what a school resource officer should do. I don't know. I mean, it's active shooter. They've all talked about what active shooter training is. You know, you run towards the sound, you assume that there's more than one person, they do stop the bleeding. There's all these different things that they're trained for. So, and they had this officer on the stand for quite some time, but I think because he was a captain, so they all wanted to hear what the captain was going to say. And the captain pointed out where he saw Scott Peterson standing. He said he appeared to be very frustrated with his radio and anxious. He says, but we were all frustrated and anxious because, this is going down and we don't know, is the shooter in the building? Is the shooter gone? Nobody knows. Because when Scott Peterson asked the assistant principal to check the footage to see where the shooter was, he came back on the radio and said, the shooter's in the 1200 building on the 3rd floor. Well, he was looking at time delay. It had already occurred 20 minutes ago. The shooter was long gone. But they didn't know this. They're thinking, oh, he's on the 3rd floor. We're going to go down into the stairwell. We're going to wait for him to come down. And then when he doesn't come down, they're all confused. What's going on? So, and this officer agreed, same as all of the other officers. When you got there, you didn't rush into the 1200 building, did you? No. But by the same token, we didn't hear any shooting. We got to the scene. We didn't know where the shooter was. We're not hearing anything. So, no, we're not going to rush into the 1200 building. Okay. He did admit that, they are trained that as a single officer, they can go in. It's not recommended, but they can do it. Yeah, that's what he said. I haven't had breakfast. I'm hungry. Anyway, guys, that's the show for today. It's Friday. Okay, I'm going to be live on Sunday at 11 Central Time for coffee and chat. I don't know what project I'm going to have out here, but come by, chit chat with me. I'll tell you what's coming up next week in trials. And I'll see you Monday in Crafting and Crime Daily. Have a great weekend, everybody. I love you. Hope you guys get all caught up. Bye.